Hello and welcome to this mini lecture called What is Tantra? This is an introductory lecture. My name is Siam Pascal. I'm the founder of The Light Collective. We're an online yoga studio, and here on our YouTube platform we have a whole range of free lectures, satsangs, as well as tutorials and practices. So if this kind of work is something that you're interested in, the tantric lineage as well as breath work and kriya and meditation and flows, then click subscribe to find out whenever we release a new video. So let's begin with an introduction. What is Tantra? Sometimes I mention to people that I teach Tantra or that I teach from the tantric lineage, and I get a couple of responses. Sometimes I get total fascination and a million questions, and then other times people just kind of like zip up, don't want to ask me any questions because they're really worried that all I do is teach sex practices. And I wanted to use this video to kind of flesh out the meanings of this word Tantra and go into a little more detail on it, because there's a lot of mystery and a lot of misinformation that comes with this word Tantra. So we can basically break down Tantra into two categories. The first is classical Tantra. Now, classical Tantra was a period of yoga, a philosophy and practice of yoga that flourished in the Indus Valley, now known as India, and the north region known as Kashmir in the 5th to 12th centuries. So we're talking about almost 1,000-year period where the tantric philosophy and practice was everywhere in India. And this was a practice that was yogic. So it was a yoga practice with mantra and meditation and breath work, and it was the way to practice yoga in this part of the world. And this spread across to China, Tibet, Bhutan, Nepal, and down south into places like Cambodia and Bali. Now, we have this kind of classical path of Tantra, and this is really what Tantra is. Then we have Neotantra. So Neotantra was basically created in the early 1900s in the West, and it drew upon some of the sexier viewpoints of the classical tantric philosophy and religion. And it kind of found that there were some really juicy ideas around the idea of union between the god and the goddess, sexual ecstatic union as being part of the play of the cosmos. And from some of these traditional ideas, they combined them with modern sexology, new age energy practices and ideas, and innovated a whole heap of stuff into this traditional tantric practice and created really what is probably more accurately described as being sacred sexuality or spiritual sexuality. So if you're wanting to find out more about Tantra in terms of its kind of sexy aspect, what you're really talking about is a new practice, a neo-tantric practice that has been created in the last 100 or so years. Now, some of these practices in neo-tantra do draw upon traditions like Taoism that cultivate sexual energy and life force. And there are some breathwork practices that do relate back to the tradition and the Hatha yoga lineage as well. But classical Tantra is very separate from Neo-Tantra, even though there were some specific meditations around making love with the god and the goddess. It wasn't that we were trying to continually reinterpret that in our life. Classical Tantra was all written down. So it was a very kind of literate period of yogic history where there were manuals, there were commentaries on those manuals. And if something is tantric, you will find it in a text somewhere, in a tantric text. So this is one way to kind of ensure that what you're practicing is really tantric, is to find out what text described that. And if you can find that text, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, we'll talk about the history of Tantra and why everything has gotten so muddled up between Tantra and Neotantra in a later lecture. If you can find the text and the description of the practice, then it will be truly tantric. If it is just a super sexy practice, that's great. You're doing a sacred sexuality practice, and those are super beautiful. I want to complete this little mini lecture here on Tantra, Neo-Tantra, and this little introduction into what is Tantra. And if you want some more detail, then you can follow on with some of our other details or our other lectures on what is Tantra. And don't forget to click the subscribe or head to our website to find out more about our trainings and courses.